Hello Year 6 and welcome to Friday's literacy lesson. Thank you so much to all of you that have been sending your pictures in this week. You've done an absolutely brilliant job of all of the literacy comprehensions. Really proud of each and every one of you. So please make sure you finish the week as you started by sending your work into the Year 6 email so that we can take a look what you've been up to before you go off and enjoy your weekends. So today's comprehension is still out of the Year 6 comprehension book, the Wolf one, and you are looking at pages 30 and 31. Now, this follows on nicely from the last piece of word power work that we did on Shakespeare, and it is a little extract from one of Shakespeare's plays called Macbeth. Okay, now, as you'll have probably guessed from the word power work on Shakespeare, there will be some vocabulary that you don't recognise. There's ways that it is written that you might not recognise. So it is, in that sense, a little bit of a trickier text. But I definitely know that you are up for the challenge. So, as usual, I'll go through each of the questions and give you some hints to help you. But please get in touch if you need any more help and just give it your best shot. Like I say, it's a challenge text. I just want you to have a go at it. Okay, so the first bit, it gives you a little quote from the extract of the play. Okay, it gives you a quote here and it tells you that 3 letters are missing from that phrase, from that little quote. Okay, and it asks you to rewrite it, replacing the apostrophes, because remember, apostrophes can be used for omission, for when letters have been missed out. So it asks you to try and figure out which letters have been missed in that little quote. Now, you should be able to figure it out by looking at it. So have a really careful look and see if you can figure out what those letters that should be where the apostrophes are. Okay, so that's the first one. So the second one asks you to, in your own words, to describe what the witches look like. So it asks you to go to the text, look at where the witches are described, and put it into your words. So I will be using this bit here, okay, because this is when it talks about the witches. So it says, what are these? Now, when he says these, when Banquo says these, he's talking about the witches, okay? So it says, so withered and wild. Okay, so use that vocabulary, withered and wild. And then if you notice, there's these asterisks, these little stars with a glossary here, and it says, so withered and wild in their attire. Now, attire has got a little, an asterisk next to it, so I know it's in the glossary, and attire means clothes. So withered and wild in their clothes. So think about what that impression in your mind, think about the word withered, try and work out what it means. If you're not sure what it means, look it up, and then think how that can give you a hint of what the witches look like. And then it does give a little bit by each at her once choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. Okay, so think really carefully what image that gives you in your mind. Okay, so the next one is still about the witches, and it says here that why is Banquo uncertain whether the witches are men or women? So you're looking at the same section. Upon her skinny lips you should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. So what have they got that makes Banquo question whether they are a woman? Okay. So line 16, so the next one, it points you towards line 16, tell you about Macbeth's reaction to the witch's prophecy. Remember, a prophecy is predicting something in the future that's going to happen, that he will become king. So make sure you are using the right line. So all hail Macbeth that shalt be king hereafter. So that's saying that they think he's going to be king. Good sir, why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound fair? So think about what is Banquo saying about Macbeth's reaction. So question 5, a phrase. So remember, a phrase is a few words, okay, that show that Banquo isn't sure whether the witches are real or not. So have a look here, this bit. So it tells you 16 to 21. So it gives you the little section to look at. Make sure that you are using the asterisks and looking up in the glossary what the words mean, and that really will help you on this question. Then it gives you 2 little phrases, and it asks you what they are an example of. So onomatopoeia, remember that's when words sound like the noise that they make, like crash or bang. Personification, that's where you give something that isn't human a human quality. So we've talked loads of times about different examples of personification. So the wind breathed through the city, or the stars danced in the sky. They're not actually dancing or breathing. They're a non-human, non-living object. So that's personification. Metaphor is when you say something is something else. So you might say the stars were eyes watching the city. And then different to a simile is when you say something is like something. So the stars were like eyes watching the city. And then the final one is a do you think, and it does say explain your answer, so you know what's coming next. So do you think Banquo is afraid of the witches? So you've got to use the text. So obviously your answer is going to be yes or no, or maybe a little bit of both. So if you say yes, you think he is afraid of the witches, you need to find something that Banquo says in the text that tells you he is afraid of the witches. And similarly, if you think he isn't afraid, find something in the text that tells you you think he isn't afraid. Or maybe if you think it's a mixture of both. But whatever your answer, because that's a what do you think, there's no right or wrong as long as you've got evidence from the text. As long as you've got that second bit, because it says, then you're getting your 2 marks. Okay, so that's your comprehension for today. Now, word power today. So I made a little mistake and missed out word power yesterday. I was just in my flow of comprehension and missed it out. So you had a little break from word power yesterday, but it did mean that it followed nicely on from your Shakespeare work onto Shakespeare today and the comprehension. Okay, so today's word power then is still about words and where they've come from and different places, but also how they've stood the test of time. So some words have stayed and some words have died off and they're not used anymore. Okay, so you've got some examples here of words that have stood the test of time. So you've got something that was a word that was used in the 1920s, the 1960s, and the 1990s that all mean good. Okay, now all of those words meant something else before they were used for good. Okay, so and they still have other meanings. So like wicked, for example. So sometimes people use that to mean really good or amazing, but it's also a word that means evil or nasty. Okay, so it's still got another meaning. So then it asks you to look them up and what they actually mean. And then it asks you here a slang word. So remember, not a word, not a formal word. So I'm sure you could think of one straight away off the top of your head that you use today that means good. Okay, so what would you say immediately when you think something is good? Okay, but a slang word, not a formal word. Then it asks you to look these up: ripping, groovy, and wicked. What they actually, their literal meaning was before they were used to mean the word good. Then it asks you why you think that people use slang, and you can tick more than one box at the bottom. Then it gives you some Greek and Latin words, and it asks you if you can think of any names of modern inventions that use these words, or this word is part of the modern invention. You might need to change the spellings. It tells you that in that little top tip box there. And then it says some words don't just change meaning, they just stop being used altogether. Then it gives you some words that used to be words and used to be used, but they're not used anymore. And it asks you to use the internet or a dictionary to find out what they meant. Why do you think? So then when you found out what they meant, it asks you why you think that they're not used anymore. So it might be that they're a name of an object that just doesn't exist or people don't use anymore. And then again, like on every page of these word power books, what have you learnt about how the language changes over time? Okay, so you've got Shakespeare today and words over time, and it is Friday, so have a lovely weekend. Really looking forward to seeing all of your work, and we'll see you Monday.